So here's the thing about all of the villains from The Legend of Korra. One thing that I always appreciated about this show as opposed to The Last Airbender was that every enemy that Korra faced taught her so much about herself as a person. The world around her, and in general, gave her a much more nuanced perspective on cultural issues. I always assert that the best part of Korra as a show is Korra herself, and the development that she goes through over the 4 books. It is truly nothing short of spectacular, as she becomes a completely different and matured woman by the end of the series. But a lot of her big leaps and bounds forward can be linked to the enemies she faces across the seasons, and what they end up teaching her, whether that be directly or indirectly. I mean, some seasons even end with Korra making a final decision completely agreeing with her enemy about the necessary state of the world going forward. It's why I love the decision for Korra to be facing a vastly different enemy each season, rather than one built-up enemy like the Fire Nation and Fire Lord Ozai. Most people are not a fan of this, and simply attribute it as a weakness of the show's constantly insecure position on Nickelodeon, but I think it works in the show's favor, especially when you frame this series as simply Korra's journey. It allows her to experience a myriad of contrasting ideologies, most often ones that directly conflict with what she thought was basic truth, and opens her up mentally to be more accepting and understanding of others, to the point where she can even understand outright dictators. And having each enemy be so vastly different from one another forces Korra to think about every situation differently, and learn something new about herself in the process. We start with Book 1. Amon. When Korra arrives in Book 1, she is headstrong, confident, and belligerently optimistic. She believes that she's already at the top of the world, and when she goes out into it, she is going to effect massive change, defeat powerful foes, and look good while doing it. She never expected to be genuinely intimidated or scared by anyone, or for anyone to threaten her in any serious way. She was that overconfident. I think the legends of Aang definitely contribute to her feeling invincible, because Aang from that story seems absolutely untouchable to the Fire Lord, and I'm sure Sokka was embellishing Aang's strength when retelling it to everyone he knew. After all, she is the next version of Aang, and the world hasn't really seen any sort of giant threat anyway since the 100-Year War. She didn't really expect anything on a large scale to come out of Republic City when she goes there, simply thinking that she could plow through the world and keep the general peace, eventually earning the same recognition as Aang. Or, at least, not anything that could threaten the Avatar. She sees herself as a larger-than-life figure, and because she's been sheltered by her father and Tenzin, that theory has never been tested, and that confidence only grew and grew. We see this a lot throughout her behavior in the first season, where in Leaf in the Wind, she's not really willing to accept that she isn't able to accomplish something by herself, with the skills that she already has. She becomes extremely frustrated with airbending and ends up destroying an ancient artifact because that view as the untouchable Avatar is finally being challenged. But Amon, specifically, beats her down and crushes her confidence repeatedly, threatening to take away the one thing that she believes makes her strong. He is the perfect threat to Korra at this point in her life. From the first moment she sees him in the revelation, she feels true fear for the first time in her entire life. To her, bending is everything that she is and everything that makes her great. To lose it would be to lose herself, and honestly, she would have no reason to go on. We see this directly in her dream of Amon in Voice in the Night. She literally sees herself as nothing without bending, not a person who has any value. Bending is what gives her that value, and it shakes her confidence in herself a great deal. She usually would jump at the opportunity Tarlok provides her in this episode with his task force, but Amon has forced her to reevaluate her own strength, and has caused a huge amount of doubt to fester within herself. And she tries to cover it up with bravado, fumbling to reconcile that I'm unbeatable mindset with the fact that she lost to a couple of regular-ass chi blockers and could very well lose to Amon. Tarlok uses this to pressure her into joining his task force, feeding further into that need to show everyone how tough she is, which is why she challenges him to a duel far too early and ends up being captured, only to be let go at Amon's whim. It's only after this event where she can finally admit her fear and show to Tenzin that she has been truly frightened by Amon. She's never felt this way before because of her sheltered childhood, and she has no idea how to deal with these emotions. This is a huge point of development for Korra. It's the first thing to put a crack in that strong front she holds up all the time to protect herself. And, as Tenzin says, this is the first step in overcoming them.
I've been scared this whole time. I've never felt like this before, and I don't know what to do.
Admitting your fears is the first and most difficult step in overcoming them.
With diligence and training, she will be able to triumph over these fears. But first, she has to admit that they exist, and trying to hold up that strong, brave, unbeatable front will only hurt herself more in the long run. And she also learns from this conflict that there isn't a firm bad guy in any fight. The sides are not as clear as they used to be in the 100-Year War, and she can't always trust the people on her side either. Although, to be fair to Atla, they also play around with who you can trust. But this brings up a sub-villain that I also think is rather important to Korra's initial development: Tarlok. The conflict in Book 1 is set up in an excellent way, portraying it at first as just benders versus non-benders, which is why Korra works with Tarlok at first. She trusts the people on her side, and will do whatever she can to deal with the evil equalists, as she sees it. Even when we see in Voice in the Night that the handling of the insurrectionists is a tad extreme. They straight up flood this place filled with people who just have a poster of Amon and freeze them and don't go back to melt it that quick. They aren't breathing. They're just learning chi blocking? Is this even illegal at this point in Republic City? But Korra is still new to this world and sees this as an all-out victory for taking down the enemy, even if these people didn't really do anything expressly wrong yet. Most of the non-benders following Amon just want to defend themselves, not see every bender lose their power, which is what Korra's assumption is when she first sees Amon. However, in When Extremes Meet, she truly sees the complexity of this conflict and how there are innocent non-benders caught in the crossfire of the response from the bending community. How some on her own side are taking it too far, and how Amon might even be a little bit right about some benders and the oppression that non-benders face. After all, this was part of Amon's plan. He knew that the bending elite would respond in kind to his movement, which only fuels it further. So realistic, by the way. But Korra has a strong sense of right and wrong, so when Tarlok starts using equalists as an excuse to mistreat and oppress all non-bending citizens, she can immediately identify it as a step too far. Shutting down power in their districts, arresting innocent people for being associated with equalists, Korra knows that that is the behavior of the enemy, and begins to learn that it isn't always clear from which side that enemy is approaching. The "You're our Avatar 2" moment is so crucial for her as well.
You benders can't treat us this way!
Mommy, look! It's the Avatar!
Please help us! You're our Avatar too!
It shows her what her true responsibility is, to protect the innocent and preserve balance, and reminds her that while she pursues justice, there will always be blameless citizens affected by her actions and the actions of her allies, and what she says has an impact on how people treat others. We see a lot of this development shown in Book 2 when dealing with those from the Southern Water Tribe. She is siding with Unalaq, but she tries to avoid fighting them, working to restrain them without hurting them, and ultimately understands that they are victims in this conflict too, especially because she was raised in the South in the first place. She also convinces Unalaq to give them a fair trial, asserting that strong sense of justice that she learned from this discourse in Book 1. She knows the importance of due process, and has seen what brushing by the law and the official justice system for the sake of, quote, peace, can do to ordinary citizens who haven't done anything wrong. She also sees that power and strength aren't everything in this world, and that with cunning and political maneuvering, you can completely dominate others without fighting them at all. It goes a long way to show her how relying on your bending abilities can lead to disaster, especially when you have people like Tarlok, who harbor an immense number of secrets. Although, to be fair, Tarlok did throw the first blow in their fight. Either way, he did outsmart her this episode, using his influence to try and bend her to his will quite effectively, and when she still wouldn't comply, ultimately capturing her. Korra challenging him in his office was a surprise to him, for sure, but he had so much leverage over her that there wasn't much she could do but fight him anyway. And later, Tarlok even shows his own humanity, as well as Amon's, to Korra, showing that even those she has to face are ultimately just those who were misguided and often misunderstood. Tarlok was downright cruel to Korra earlier in the season, but when she sees him in such a pitiful position and learns the tragedies that he's endured, she's able to see him as a human who simply made mistakes, and someone who can recognize those mistakes now. He also shows Korra that no one is above their own humanity, even Amon, who goes really far to present himself as a larger-than-life figure. Dare I say, almost Avatar-like? The whole season we see him as this masked entity with insurmountable power, not really an actual person. His backstory about his father being killed by a firebender is flimsy, and he doesn't even seem like a fully fleshed out human, even if his cause does have its good points. But here, we learn that he's actually a victim of severe emotional abuse, overcompensating due to the treatment he received from his father, Yakone. As Tarlok says, he truly does feel bending is the root of all evil in the world, because once he became a bender, his father became cruel and demanding. The world became cruel and demanding. He insisted that he learn bloodbending, which is undoubtedly the ugliest and most callous form of bending, and then tried to get him to force his cruelty onto others, bloodbending helpless animals, and eventually his own brother. It definitely distorted his idea of bending in the opposite way that Korra's upbringing did. While she learned that bending was what was special about her, Amon resented it for what it did to his family. And the opposites in these outlooks is exactly why Korra is able to learn so much from Amon. So when he fled and came to Republic City, he worked and mastered a form of bloodbending that can essentially perma-chi block bending until he was able to form a movement, fueling the anger of the non-benders to strike back against the, as he saw it, monstrous bending community, because it produced the most loathsome person of all, his own father. Korra being able to learn for the first time why her enemies are doing what they do, and that it's not always like it is with Ozai, who ultimately was just thirsting for power. That was like one of his 2 personality traits. I'm probably gonna get flamed in the comments for simplifying Ozai like that, but it's kinda true. He did not have much of a personality. He was just evil. Some causes are born of good intentions, but fueled by anger, bitterness, and vengeance, ultimately just becoming villainous in the process. And at the heart of all this evil, you might find simply an injured child crying out for help, still trying to save their family. It ultimately sets up her ability in Book 2 to be able to look at her enemies and see that they might have been correct about some aspects of the world, and that she can take wisdom from them even if they might have taken their ideologies too far. And then, at the end of Book 1, when her worst fear does come true, she's able to learn her value beyond her bending, even if it is given back to her soon after. She is still able to defeat Amon without her typical skill and prowess, and is able to find power within herself despite knowing she should be powerless. I think there's a really strong message when she is able to learn airbending after losing everything else, because she resolves to move forward. Now, when she realizes she isn't going to be able to get her bending back, she does consider suicide. This is the emotional climax of her journey across the first book, weighing the value of her life against her bending abilities. And I think people see this scene as her being bailed out, but I don't think it actually is. You see her look over the edge and shed a tear while she's considering what to do next, but then step back and curl up. I saw this as her deciding not to give up, but instead resolving to live with the sorrow of having her identity taken away from her. And that is why Aang and the past avatars give her bending back to her, because she chose to continue to live and learned that she deserved to live, that there would even be a life beyond bending. And as a reward for this spiritual growth, Aang gives her this gift. At her lowest moment, she chose to continue living. And that's why she was open to the greatest amount of change, as Aang says. And you might say that it's lazy, or that they needed a quick happy ending, but I firmly believe this was the best way to end Season 1, given the conflict they had set up and explored between Korra, her own bending abilities, and Amon throughout the entire season. Book 2, Unalaq. A lot of people say she backpedaled on development in the Season 2 premiere, but I think she's exactly where we left her. She's learned that bending isn't all she is and that she has value beyond that, but she hasn't learned to separate herself from the Avatar and treat herself as a human being, someone who makes mistakes, someone who has earthly attachments. It's why I think having Unalaq be her uncle is one of the smartest choices of Book 2. Tying her duty as an Avatar directly to her familial and personal issues is a fantastic way to highlight the blurry line between them for Korra. She really struggles to stay close to her family at the beginning of Book 2, seeing them as getting in her way of her job as an Avatar.
I never wanted a normal childhood. All I ever wanted to be was the Avatar. But everyone keeps holding me back, even my own parents. Unalaq's the only one who believes in me.
But she trusts Unalaq because he can directly help her with her Avatar pursuits. And as she leans further into that, the distrust of her father and her own family grows, even though they're the ones who actually care for her well-being. When her father protects her, she doesn't see it as him caring for her, she sees it as him doing her job for her, and that's why she gets so frustrated with him early on. And it's the same with Tenzin. When he pleads for Korra to stay with him, his reasoning is that they've come so far together, whereas Unalaq simply states that he has more to teach her as an avatar. Korra selecting Unalaq and turning away from those she actually respects and cares for is a clear sign that she doesn't really value her personal connections as much as her professional ones. And she doesn't value her personal life as much as her life as an avatar. We can see all this very evidently in the argument with her mother in Civil Wars Part 1, where she tells Korra that they kept her sequestered because they wanted to raise her like a normal child, to be able to give her what every other child is given and what was taken from Aang so early on. But Korra states that all she ever wanted to be was the Avatar. Even if she does recognize her value beyond her bending abilities, she doesn't see herself as a human being who needs the same treatment and love that other humans need. Not to mention that when Mako rats her out to the president and exposes her plan to use the military behind his back, she takes it personally, rather than understanding that it was part of Mako's job to answer the literal president. I don't love that he gave her up here, but I mean, this is the president! Even going so far as to be violent towards Mako in his workplace. She just cannot separate her professional enemies from her personal ties, and ends up hurting the people she cares about most as a result of the frustration she feels for her job. And this ends up ending her relationship with Mako, even if they do kinda get back together later. This is basically the end. And when Unalaq is supporting her, he supports her as an avatar, not as a person.
But I don't have any connection with the spirits.
You have to believe in yourself, like I believe in you.
I guess I'm just so used to people telling me how to do things that I forgot what it was like to have someone trust in me.
Korra, all the past avatars live on inside of you. Let them guide you. Let them help you find the light in the dark.
She's merely a tool to him, and while it may feel like to Korra that she's finally getting the support she needs, it's really only because the people around her treated her as a human and not an avatar. And she herself states that the avatar is all she wants to be. So she drifts toward Unalaq, at least at first. But then Unalaq reveals his true goal, that he wants to become something more than human as well, to surpass his humanity and become a monster of destruction, essentially. And in doing so, removes Raava from Korra, stripping her of the avatar state entirely. This period is one of intense growth for Korra, having lost everything that defined her, and seeing what the pursuit of being more than human can do to you and your family. She has to re-examine how she views herself and what she wants going forward in her own life. As Tenzin teaches her, she needs to find strength in her own personality and self, as Korra, without the title of the Avatar. And in the process, face the ultimate version of herself that she's always wanted to be, but is now realizing might be too far. She's able to realize a step too far, and the importance of retaining your humanity, your earthly tethers, as Zaheer would later put it. She realizes that Unalaq pushing so far into his role to the world ends up causing pain to those closest to him, like Eska and Desna. He abandons those he cares about, and that is the one line that Korra could never really cross, which is why she's able to realize her own power in the process. The Avatar title was almost holding her back this whole time. The previous episode, it's about finding strength in Raava and beating Vaatu, but it isn't enough in the end because Korra doesn't have enough faith in herself, which is why her conversation with Tenzin is so crucial for her development. He reinvigorates her sense of purpose and clarifies who she really is without this title pinned to her chest. And because she's able to move past this, she's able to harness the greatest amount of spiritual power we've ever seen thus far, and because it's harmonic convergence. I know people don't really like the Book 2 finale, but I will forever scream into the night that it is a misunderstood masterpiece that is way overhated, mostly because of how meaningful the final conflict is, and how much it mirrors Korra's internal conflict. There was such great character work done in this finale, but a lot of people simply reduce it to giant blue Korra, instead of the amazing metaphor that it is. People's hate for the show really gets to me sometimes, but that's just the nature of being PosiTVty and trying to like things. But of course, the largest point of change for Korra is accepting that Unalaq might have had a valid point when he said the spirits and humanity should live together. Wan separated the spirit world from the physical world because of the contention between the humans and the spirits at the time. But it was always his plan to teach the world to be able to live in harmony and to achieve that ultimate balance once again. Until then, he would be the bridge. Originally, the spirits and humans were meant to live together, and Korra being able to see partially what her enemy was fighting for and even agree with their reasoning is the perfect evidence of how much growth she's gone through. She no longer sees herself as the perfect avatar who will plow forward, always knowing what's best. She accepts wisdom from other sources and opens her mind up to the possibility that she and the people she regularly works with don't always know what's best. She has to decide for herself, utilizing as much wisdom from as many different places as she can. And this is definitely the person we meet at the beginning of Book 3. Plus, this decision to agree with Unalaq leads to some incredibly positive change and the rebalancing of the bending world as a whole, rewarding her for trusting her own instincts and being willing to learn from those she faces off against. Which brings us to Book 3, Zaheer / the Red Lotus. Zaheer goes farther than any villain before to demonstrate his cause to Korra and to show her what he actually stands for. I mean, it's actually revealed that he or the Red Lotus would have raised and taught Korra given the opportunity. But while he is playing her in this scene in the spirit world in the stakeout, Zaheer does openly confide in Korra about his plans and beliefs, and is even able to partially convince her that what he's doing is for the sake of balance, at least in his own mind. As he says, even Korra agreed that Avatar Wan should not have closed the spirit portals, or at least they shouldn't have remained closed for so long. Zaheer simply takes it a step further, saying that Vaatu should not have been separated from Rava, and that chaos has a place in the natural order of the world. And while Zaheer goes a bit too far in thinking that only chaos should reign, rather than only order as Rava has been for so long, Korra can see the wisdom in this belief. She encountered the Earth Queen earlier in the season and immediately recognizes that she is a heartless tyrant. She has to help her and obey, but only because she's learned not to stir up trouble wherever she goes if she actually wants to succeed and get these airbenders. And while she doesn't believe outright killing her is the right move, she can see exactly what the problem with that type of leader is. I mean, when they go get the tax money for her, simply to be able to meet the new airbenders, they feel as if they're defending the wrong side, and the gold does actually belong to the people, as they say when they try to steal it.
You're on the wrong side of this fight, Avatar! That gold belongs to the people, not the Queen!
Why do I get the feeling he's right?
The Queen is simply hoarding it all for herself. And it's rather obvious. And I think that Book 3 in general does a really fantastic job of highlighting Korra's frustration with these leaders, having Raiko be unbearable in the beginning and introducing us to the greedy, unlikable Earth Queen, just to endear us to Zaheer's ideology even more, further shown by the state of Ba Sing Se when we arrive. The lower ring is in complete disarray. Meanwhile, the temple is bigger than ever and entirely made of gold. It's an absolute nightmare of class division and just proves the point Zaheer is trying to make further. I mean, people cheer when the Earth Queen dies. People love Zaheer for doing that, even if it did result in the worst dictator the Avatar world has ever seen. Not to mention the fact that Korra defeated Vaatu at the end of Book 2, which, as Rava states, simply means that he's gonna grow inside of her until he's strong enough to emerge again. You can't defeat light or darkness.
He cannot destroy light any more than I can destroy darkness. One cannot exist without the other. Even if I defeat Vaatu in this encounter, darkness will grow inside me until he emerges again. The same will hold true if Vaatu defeats me.
Essentially, she's tied the two spirits together once again, and presumably has a piece of Vaatu inside of her as well. This is exactly what the Red Lotus would want. A perfectly balanced avatar. Not dark, not light, but both living in one heart. But perhaps the biggest part of what Zaheer teaches to her comes from the fact that Korra never really lost this badly before. There were moments of desperation, for sure, but there was no ending of a conflict that left her completely shaken. She lost the past avatars to Unalaq, yes, but she ultimately bounced back quickly, even if they were never returned, and was able to continue with her job immediately after, despite not having that abundant wisdom. Zaheer is the villain to change that, the first one to completely put her out of commission for months on end, pushing her into a state of deep depression and avoidance. As Korra puts it in Book 4, she sees him as ruining her.
My problem is you. You poisoned me. You ruined me. People used to think I was unstoppable, but now they don't think I'm capable of anything.
Blaming me is a crutch to make you feel better, but it's not helping you recover.
She used to think she was a force of nature, someone who couldn't ever be stopped, even after being beaten down so many times. When, in reality, Zaheer instilled a fear into Korra that no other villain had been able to do previously. Even after he's locked up, she continued to be tormented by visions of Zaheer and the torture that he put her through. And it's proven that PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what Korra suffers throughout Book 4, fundamentally changes brain functions, causing Korra to act completely different than we're used to. According to an article that I've linked below, PTSD is known to cause heightened activity in the amygdala, which leads to an intensified fear response and reaction to stimuli in the environment around them, which we can clearly see when Korra travels the world by herself, seeing Zaheer and the duty, the avatar that she avoids, and now fears everywhere she turns. She's jumpy and scared, on edge all the time, very unlike Korra we've seen in the past. Not to mention that PTSD can also be responsible for visual and auditory hallucinations, which Korra experiences throughout her journey in Korra Alone. And all of these fears mounting can lead to avoidant behavior to deal with it, which we see when Korra removes herself from her family, friends, and those who care about her in an effort to escape those terrifying emotions and memories that her brain is forcing her to relive. She wants to outrun them, rather than face that overwhelming fear that Zaheer struck into her. That's why she goes to the Earth Kingdom and pretends that she isn't the Avatar, having to go around and face what she isn't able to live up to and be reminded of her failings is too much for her, and brings back everything that Zaheer made her feel. So, she resolves to walk away from that piece of herself, for fear that indulging further into it would lead to similar trauma that she faced at the end of Book 3. Not to mention that she leaves home in the first place because she's consistently reminded of her own failings there, with her physical therapy and Katara and her family constantly consoling her. I've linked an article below about this type of behavior as well, as avoidance is a rather common coping mechanism for PTSD. Overall, Zaheer forces her on a path that Korra never saw herself walking, and honestly, one that the audience never saw Korra walking. One where she wants to give up and leave everything that she thought was so important to her behind in an effort to triumph over the fear, to keep up that strong front that she has been trying to hold since the beginning of the series. But the most incredible part about Zaheer is that he is the one who helps her move past this state. It takes Zaheer guiding her through this memory for her to realize that it holds no power over her, that she's been blaming this incident for ruining her and wondering what would have happened if she never fought Zaheer, rather than dealing with the incident itself and resolving to move forward.
Neither of us are the same as before. I learned to fly, but now I'm bound in chains. You have all the power in the world and the freedom to use it, but you choose to hold yourself down.
I'm not holding myself down, but my powers have limits.
You're wrong.
But Zaheer teaches her to accept that her life has changed, and with that, she's going to be able to move forward and get stronger, which she does, especially spiritually, which we can see when she immediately reconnects with Rava. Instead of running away from the memory of her loss to Zaheer, he teaches her to face it and embrace it as a part of her journey, something that makes her who she is today, and something that will not define her forever. And admitting that is what allows her to be able to move on from it and grow. She can face the fear and work to overcome it, allowing her to continue her duty to the world and the past avatars. And she does have Zaheer to thank for leading her there. Book 4. Kuvira. I fully believe that even with Zaheer fully mentoring Korra, Kuvira is the one who taught Korra the most about herself, simply because Kuvira is the mirror image of early seasons Korra, and through her, Korra can evaluate how far she's come on her own and, in turn, learn to understand and show compassion to even the most reprehensible people. Kuvira is headstrong, driven, and so confident that she believes she's in the right even when going way too far over the line. Like, very obviously over the line. While yes, she was right that the Earth Kingdom in disarray needed to be solved and reconnected, and yes, it didn't seem like there was anyone else going to step up to the task, she took the idea of unity way too far. And Korra makes the same mistakes early on with the Equalists, driving forward with her own plan, not really noticing at first that there were innocent people being caught up in her pursuit. And also, just in general, not knowing when to stop, nor caring about property damage. Kuvira sets the entire Republic City skyline ablaze with her giant mech, but Korra does a great deal of damage to the city when taking care of her charges too, as we see from the first episode. She doesn't really know how to limit it, at least at first. Their confidence and rather thick-headed attitude doesn't really let them see when they're going too far, and only presents them as justified in their own minds. Likely due to their own childhood, which I will get more into in just a little bit. Both of them are women of action. When someone isn't getting something done, they personally feel the need to step up and assume whatever position is necessary to fill that hole. We see the same with Korra when she lashes out at the president because of his inaction and tries to recruit the military behind his back. Rather rash decision that a lot of fans criticize her on, and kind of rightly so. It is insubordination to the max. But it's because they both can't stand to sit idly by when there are pressing issues on the table. They feel a personal responsibility to the world. Korra because of her duty to her title, and Kuvira because of her duty to her kingdom and Suyin. And I think Kuvira going too far resembles Korra's struggle to retain her humanity in Book 2. She immerses herself deeper and deeper into this great uniter title that she begins to see herself as something that is more than human, or at least more important than the average citizen, and with more vision too. And as she moves further and further into that title, she's willing to concede more and more of her humanity and sense of justice, ultimately even giving up the man she loves for the sake of her own ideals. We saw how Kuvira started. She really wanted to do something good, but she lost herself in that praise that came with fixing an entire country and grew into someone with an out-of-control ego. As such, she felt she couldn't just give it over to the new king, especially when that prospective king is a fucking dolt, though I doubt that would have mattered to Kuvira at all. Plus, while their childhoods are not similar on a surface level, they both struggle with control, stemming from their treatment while they were children. Kuvira had parents for quite a long time into her young life until they abandoned her. Feeling that rejection and that lack of power when being forcibly moved away from the only people who've cared about you and that you have cared about can create a real need for control inside of you. That powerlessness that you are taken away from something that you would choose to stay in. To avoid feeling that fear again, to avoid feeling alone, Kuvira resolves to take as much dominance over the world around her as possible, and as such is a large reason why she goes so far in her quest to unite the Earth Kingdom and form the Earth Empire. She needs jurisdiction over as much of her dominion and citizens as possible, and that includes Republic City at the end of the day. When she doesn't control them, they have the possibility of leaving her, like her parents did. If she's able to achieve this, no one will ever be left alone again, even if they spend their whole life in prison camps. Isn't that lovely? Thank you, Great Uniter! While Korra was kept sequestered in the South Pole for her entire young life until she was 16, having every choice dictated for her, and not even being allowed to go outside of her compound without express permission from a squadron of White Lotus soldiers. She had no opportunity to make her own way in the world like Aang did as a child, and it left her wanting so badly to be able to be free and find her own way as the Avatar, to be able to go to the city and plow her way forward, to be able to make a name for herself. But it also leaves her completely unprepared, which is why she doesn't make the best choices when she first gets there, but still fumbles for as much control as possible, even if she doesn't necessarily know what to do with it. So, when Kuvira is beaten and stands below Korra, still resembling that scared child who's about to be abandoned all over again, Korra is able to offer her hand to her, even after she just tried to obliterate her. She's able to show compassion to one of the people who least deserves it, and understands how their movement got so out of hand in the first place. And this leads to a peaceful resolution, with Kuvira giving up her power and asking the army to stand down. And I love when people are upset with Korra for forgiving Kuvira after being angry with her for being too rash for so long. It's just like, what do you want from this girl? She's learned so much over the course of the series, but even after that development, people are like, no, she should fucking kill Kuvira. No! Even later in the comics, Kuvira is taken out of prison to help them fully end the Earth Empire for good, showing how beneficial this resolution was and how crucial it is to understand your enemies. Korra's compassion and empathy allowed her to bring about balance more effectively, and in turn made her a better Avatar. As she says in the finale to Tenzin,
I needed to understand what true suffering was, so I could become more compassionate to others, even to people like Kuvira.
And the villains are one of the largest reasons that she was taught this lesson. Not just because of the suffering they inflicted upon her, but because of the values that they showed to her during their fights with them as well. It just all goes to show how much development Korra has gone through across the 4 books, and how each villain taught her something new and unique about herself and the world. Every single one of them led us to this wonderful, fully fleshed out, mature Korra that we have at the end of the final book, and I thank each and every one of them for what they were able to teach them. Not to mention the fact that all of these villains, yes, even Unalaq, are incredibly well written and mirror what Korra is learning throughout the season in an insanely effective way. I wouldn't have done this show any other way. A lot of people say it should have just been the Red Lotus, but personally, I love the Equalists, and I would not want to get rid of them, nor would I want to get rid of Kuvira or Unalaq. I think having these differentiating villains with completely different ideologies, able to teach Korra what they feel is correct, and able to impart at least some semblance of wisdom onto the main character, more so than Fire Lord Ozai ever did, is amazing to me. And I applaud this series for being able to do that. But let me know if you agree in the comments below, and if you want to support us further, go to our Patreon at patreon.com/PosiTVty. That's PosiTVty. There you can get all these videos early, you get the unedited essays so you can hear me mess up, and you get to choose pretty much explicitly what you want to see on the channel. So it's a great way to support us, but also get more content for yourself, and you can join for free if you want to just get free previews of the videos before they hit YouTube. So go there, but also supporting us here is fantastic. Subscribing, commenting, liking, we appreciate it all. Apparently YouTube is taking away likes now. I don't know how, I don't like that, but we'll see. Keep liking those videos, interaction matters, and I appreciate every bit of it from you guys. So thank you so much, and I will see you for the next video, whether it be about Korra, BoJack, or whatever else you want to see. And have a wonderful day. I know it's a tough time, but you guys are gonna get through it, okay? You got this, alright? Stay PosiTVty. Oh my god, that's so lame. Bye.